Thornwood Manor had stood on the bluffs overlooking the Pacific Ocean for nearly a century. Built in 1928 by a railroad magnate with more money than taste, it had passed through a dozen hands before falling into disrepair in the early 2000s. When I first saw it 3 years ago, the gardens were overgrown, the ballroom ceiling was water-stained, and the grand staircase had a crack running through 3 of its marble steps. I had fallen in love with it immediately. Now, standing in the restored foyer with its gleaming chandeliers and polished floors, I watched my family attempt to destroy the wedding I had spent 2 years planning. "We're canceling this venue," my mother announced to Helena, the event coordinator, with the kind of authority that came from decades of getting exactly what she wanted. "The wedding is off." Helena, a composed woman in her 50s who had coordinated hundreds of events in this space, looked from my mother to me with obvious confusion. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Lawson, but I don't have any cancellation request from the bride. The bride doesn't know what she's doing." My mother cut her off with a wave of her hand. "She can't afford this place anyway.
We all know that.
This wedding is a fantasy that's gone on long enough." My father stepped forward, his corporate lawyer persona fully activated. "We'll need a full refund of whatever deposit was paid. I'm sure you understand that under the circumstances, holding funds for an event that won't be taking place would be legally questionable." "Robert, please." My Aunt Patricia placed a hand on his arm, though her expression suggested support rather than restraint. "Let them handle this professionally." The them in question was the small army of family members who had descended on Thornwood Manor this morning, ostensibly for a final walkthrough before tomorrow's ceremony. My mother, my father, Aunt Patricia, Uncle William, my grandmother Eleanor, my younger sister Madison, and Madison's husband Derek, all gathered in the foyer like a jury that had already reached its verdict. I stood slightly apart from the group, next to my fiancé Nathan, who was gripping my hand so tightly I could feel my engagement ring pressing into my finger. His parents, Susan and Michael Chen, flanked his other side, their faces reflecting the same bewildered horror I felt. "Mrs. Lawson," Helena tried again, her professional smile showing strain. "I really need to speak with Ms. Lawson, with Olivia, directly about any changes to the event." "Olivia has nothing to say." My mother turned to look at me, her expression a mixture of pity and contempt that I had become intimately familiar with over the past 31 years. "Do you, sweetheart? You can't actually afford this venue. You can't afford that dress you picked out. You certainly can't afford to marry someone without a real career." Nathan stiffened beside me. He was a marine biologist who had spent the last decade studying coral reef restoration, work that was important and meaningful, even if it didn't come with a corner office or a 6-figure salary. "Catherine." Susan Chen's voice was sharp. "That's completely uncalled for." "Is it?" My mother raised an eyebrow. "I'm simply stating facts. Olivia works at a nonprofit. Nathan studies fish. Between the two of them, they probably make less than Madison's shoe budget." She laughed at her own joke, and several family members joined in. Madison, my younger sister by 4 years, smiled prettily. She had always been the golden child, married at 25 to Derek, an investment banker who came from old money and worked at a firm that managed even older money. Their wedding had been a $2 million affair at the Ritz-Carlton, featured in 3 bridal magazines, and talked about in our family with the kind of reverence usually reserved for religious experiences. My wedding, by contrast, had been met with skepticism from the moment I announced my engagement. "The venue alone is $80,000, my father said, addressing Helena as if I weren't standing right there.
"Ever checked?"
"There's no way Olivia could have afforded the deposit, let alone the full amount. Either she's committed fraud, or someone else is paying for this. Either way, we need to sort it out now, before this charade goes any further." "It's not a charade," I said quietly. Every head turned toward me. It was the first time I had spoken since the ambush began. "Oh, honey." My mother's voice dripped with condescension. "We know you want this to be real. We know you've dreamed of a beautiful wedding in a beautiful place. But dreams don't pay bills. And frankly, after everything Nathan's family has failed to contribute," she shot a pointed look at Susan and Michael, "it's time for someone to be honest with you. We offered to contribute. Michaelchan said, his voice tight with controlled anger. Multiple times. You refuse. Contribute what? A few $1,000s? My father laughed. This venue costs more than your house. The insult hung in the air, ugly and deliberate. Susan's face went red. Nathan made a sound low in his throat, something between a growl and a word. That's enough. I released Nathan's hand and stepped forward, placing myself between my family and his. You don't get to come into my wedding venue and insult my future in-laws. Your wedding venue? Madison laughed. Live, please. You can barely afford your apartment. You drive a 10-year-old Honda. Last Christmas, you gave everyone homemade gifts because you couldn't afford real presents. I gave homemade gifts because I thought they were meaningful. You gave homemade gifts because you're broke. Madison examined her manicure with studied disinterest. Just admit it. This whole thing is some kind of elaborate delusion. Either that or you're in debt up to your eyeballs. Grandmother Eleanor, who had been silent until now, stepped forward with the aid of her silver-handled cane. At 83, she was still the family matriarch, her opinion carrying more weight than anyone else's. Olivia, dear. Her voice was gentle, which somehow made it worse. We're not trying to hurt you. We're trying to protect you. You've always been the dreamer of the family, head in the clouds, as your grandfather used to say. But there comes a time when dreams need to give way to reality. And what is reality, Grandma? Reality is that you can't afford this life. You work for a nonprofit that probably pays you in gratitude and good feelings. You're engaged to a man who plays with fish for a living. You've booked a venue that costs more than most people's houses. Something doesn't add up. Helena had been watching this exchange with growing discomfort. She caught my eye, a question in her expression. Do you want me to call security? I gave a tiny shake of my head.
Not yet.
So, what exactly is your plan here? I asked my family. You show up the day before my wedding, cancel my venue, and what? I just go home and forget the whole thing. You come home and let us help you sort out this mess, my mother said, as if this were obvious. We'll deal with whatever debts you've accumulated. We'll help you end this engagement gracefully. And then you can start over, maybe with someone more suitable. More suitable. Nathan's voice was dangerously flat. You mean someone with money? I mean someone who can provide for her properly. My mother didn't even pretend to soften the blow. Someone from a good family. Someone who didn't grow up in... Where did you grow up, Nathan? Some farming community in the Central Valley. My parents are teachers, Nathan said. They worked hard to give me opportunities. I'm proud of where I come from. Yes, well. My mother's dismissive tone said everything. Pride doesn't pay for Thornwood Manor. Catherine, that's enough. Susan stepped forward, her small frame rigid with anger. You've insulted my son, my husband, and our entire family. You've tried to cancel a wedding that isn't yours to cancel. And you've done all of this based on assumptions that you've never bothered to verify. What's there to verify? My father spread his hands. We know what Olivia makes. We know what Nathan makes. We know what this venue costs. The math doesn't work. Maybe your math doesn't work, I said. Maybe you don't have all the numbers. My mother laughed. Oh, sweetheart. What numbers could we possibly be missing? Did you win the lottery? Find buried treasure? Rob a bank? She glanced at the rest of the family, inviting them to share the joke. Please enlighten us. Where did the money come from? Before I could answer, Helena's tablet buzzed. She glanced at it, and something shifted in her expression, a flicker of understanding, or perhaps relief. If you'll excuse me for just a moment, she said. There's a call I need to take. She stepped away, but not far, just to the edge of the foyer, where she could still be heard if she spoke loudly enough. And speak loudly she did. Yes, sir. Yes, they're here now. The Lawson family, yes. A pause. No, sir, the bride hasn't authorized anything. They're claiming, yes, exactly. Another pause, longer this time. I understand completely. I'll let them know you're on your way. She ended the call and returned to the group, her professional smile now carrying a hint of something I could only describe as anticipation. The property owner has been informed of the situation, she announced. He's asked me to convey that no cancellations or changes will be made without the explicit written consent of the bride. He's also coming down to address your concerns personally. The property owner? My father's eyes narrowed. I thought Thornwood Manor was owned by some LLC. A development company. Thornwood Estate Holdings, Helena confirmed. The managing partner prefers to be involved personally when there are disputes.
Phoenix.
My mother drew herself up to her full height, which was considerable even without her heels. Let him come. I'm sure once he hears the situation, he'll understand that this wedding isn't going to happen. Regardless of whatever fantasy Olivia has constructed, the reality is that she can't pay for any of this. Mrs. Lawson. Helena's voice was carefully neutral. I'm not sure you fully understand the situation. I understand perfectly. My daughter has gotten in over her head, and now it's up to the adults to clean up the mess. She turned to me, her expression shifting to something that might have been sympathy if it weren't so laced with judgment. It's not your fault, Olivia. You've always wanted things you couldn't have, but wanting doesn't make it so. I was quiet for a long moment, looking at my mother, really looking at her. This woman who had given me life, but had never seemed to actually see me. Who had praised Madison's every accomplishment while dismissing mine as cute hobbies. Who had made it clear from childhood that success meant money, status, and marrying well, and that anything less was failure. You know what I've always wondered, Mom? I said finally. Why you never asked about my work. In 12 years at the foundation, you've never once asked what I actually do. You answer phones and plan fundraisers. We know what you do. I'm the executive director. I have been for 6 years. Before that, I was the director of programs. Before that, I was a program manager. I worked my way up, Mom, just like Dad always said people should. My father waved this away. Executive director of a tiny nonprofit is still just a nonprofit. You make, what, $60,000 a year? 70? That doesn't change anything. You're right. It doesn't change anything. I took a breath. Because my salary isn't how I paid for this wedding. Then how? The question was interrupted by the sound of footsteps on the grand staircase. Everyone turned to look. A man was descending, mid-30s, wearing jeans and a casual button-down shirt, his dark hair slightly disheveled. He moved with the easy confidence of someone completely comfortable in his surroundings. Because he was. Because this was his home. Because he was my brother. Sorry I'm late, Ethan said, reaching the bottom of the stairs. I was on a call with the London office. He nodded at Helena. Thanks for the heads up. My mother had gone very pale. Ethan? What are you doing here? I live here, Mom. Ethan crossed to stand beside me, draping an arm over my shoulders. Or did you forget that when you were trying to cancel Olivia's wedding? Ethan Lawson, the firstborn. The prodigal son who had left home at 18 after a spectacular fight with our parents and hadn't looked back. He had worked 3 jobs to put himself through college, then 3 more to fund a startup that had failed, and then another startup that had succeeded spectacularly. By 30, he had sold his second company for 9 figures and effectively disappeared from the public eye. Our parents had spent years trying to reach out to him, to bring him back into the fold, to claim credit for his success. He had rebuffed every attempt, but he had never stopped talking to me. I don't understand, my father said slowly. You own Thornwood Manor? I bought it 3 years ago. It was falling apart and I liked the bones. Ethan shrugged. Olivia helped me with the restoration. She has a good eye for design. Probably would have been an architect if anyone had ever encouraged her. My mother's eyes darted between us, trying to calculate this new equation. So, you're paying for her wedding? As some kind of charity. I'm paying for her wedding because she's my sister and I love her. Because she's marrying a good man who makes her happy. And because... Ethan's voice hardened. She deserved to have one day that wasn't about you trying to make her feel small. We weren't trying to make her feel small, Aunt Patricia protested weakly. Really? Because it sounded a lot like you were calling her broke, delusional, and incapable of making her own decisions. In front of her fiancé's family. Ethan turned to the Chens, his expression softening. Susan Michael, I'm sorry you had to witness that. The Lawson family has a long history of being terrible to anyone who doesn't fit their idea of success. Ethan, that's not fair, my mother said. We were trying to protect Olivia. You were trying to control Olivia. Like you've always tried to control all of us. Ethan's arm tightened around my shoulders. The difference is I escaped early enough to build my own life. Madison gave in and became exactly what you wanted. And Olivia? He looked at me with something like pride. Olivia found a way to be herself, while you were too busy being disappointed in her to notice. We're not disappointed, my father said, though his voice lacked its usual conviction. We just wanted more for her. More of what? More money? More status? More misery? Ethan shook his head. She runs a nonprofit that provides housing assistance to homeless families. She's helped over 10,000 people find stable housing in the past decade. She makes $68,000 a year, and she's happier than Madison has ever been in her $2 million house with her investment banker husband. Madison's face flushed red. Excuse me? It's true and you know it. Ethan's voice wasn't cruel, just matter of fact. I'm not saying your life is bad, Madison. I'm saying you live by their rules, and their rules don't actually make anyone happy. They just make people rich and respectable and miserable. The foyer had gone silent except for the distant sound of waves crashing against the bluffs outside. My grandmother was leaning heavily on her cane, her face unreadable. My parents looked like they had been physically struck. The wedding is tomorrow, Ethan continued. Olivia is getting married here, in this house, to the man she loves. The venue is paid for. The catering is paid for. The flowers, the music, the photographer, all paid for. Not because Olivia couldn't afford a wedding, but because I wanted to give my sister one day of absolute perfection without any of you finding a way to ruin it. But you didn't tell us, my mother said. All these years, you didn't tell us you owned this place. You didn't tell us you were back in contact with Olivia. Because I knew exactly what would happen if I did. Ethan's voice was flat. You would have found a way to make it about you. To take credit for my success. To use my money to control Olivia the way you use yours to control Madison. I stayed away to protect myself. I stayed connected to Olivia because she was the only one who ever loved me without conditions. My mother's eyes filled with tears. That's not true. I love all my children. You love the children who do what you want. You tolerate the ones who don't. Ethan finally released me and took a step toward our mother. When I dropped out of law school to start my first company, you told me I was throwing my life away. When I was sleeping on a friend's couch because I couldn't make rent, you offered to help, but only if I came home and took the job Dad lined up for me. When I finally succeeded, you suddenly wanted to introduce me to all your friends as your entrepreneur son. But you never actually cared about me. You cared about what I represented. That's not. My mother started, but Ethan cut her off. When's my birthday, Mom? She blinked. What? My birthday. When is it? A horrible silence stretched out. I watched my mother's face cycle through confusion, effort, and finally, a shame so profound it seemed to age her years in seconds. March 15th, she tried. November 2nd, Ethan said quietly. I turned 35 last month. Did you call? Send a card? You have my address. I know you do because you've sent your assistants to try to contact me at least a dozen times over the years. My mother had no answer. Olivia calls every year, Ethan continued. She sends a gift. She remembers my favorite foods, my favorite books, the name of my cat. She asks about my work because she's actually interested, not because she wants to tell her friends about it. She's the only person in this family who ever made me feel like I mattered, not for what I could do or what I could become, but just for who I was. I felt tears sliding down my cheeks. Nathan's arm came around me, steady and warm. So yes, Ethan said, his voice hardening again. I'm paying for her wedding. I'm hosting it in my home. And tomorrow, I'm going to walk her down the aisle, assuming Dad doesn't want the honor after today's performance. My father looked like he had been struck. I Of course I want to walk her down the aisle. She's my daughter. Then act like it. Ethan's voice brooked no argument. Tomorrow you will be here. You will be supportive. You will smile in photos and make pleasant conversation with Nathan's family. You will not make comments about money, about careers, about who deserves what. You will treat Olivia like the incredible person she is, and you will treat Nathan like the man who makes her happy. Is that clear? Another silence. Then slowly, my father nodded. Good. Ethan turned to Helena. Could you show the Lawsons to the guest cottage? I think everyone needs some time to cool down before the rehearsal dinner. Of course, sir. Helena's professional composure had fully returned, though I caught a hint of satisfaction in her eyes. If you'll follow me? My family began to move toward the door, subdued and uncertain. But Grandmother Eleanor paused, turning back to look at Ethan and me. I remember, she said quietly. Ethan frowned. Remember what? November 2nd. You were born during a storm. She smiled, something sad and soft in her expression. And Olivia used to save her allowance to buy you birthday presents. She would show me before she wrapped them, so proud of what she'd chosen. Grandma, I started. I know we've failed you both. She came closer, leaning on her cane. I know this family values the wrong things. I've known it for years, but I was too set in my ways to change anything. She reached out to touch Ethan's cheek, then mine. But I want you to know, I'm proud of you. Both of you. Not for the money or the manor or any of that. For staying kind. For staying true to yourselves. Ethan's composure cracked slightly. Grandma, walk her down the aisle tomorrow, Ethan. You've earned it. She patted my cheek gently. And you, my dear, have a beautiful wedding. You deserve it. She turned and followed the rest of the family out, leaving Ethan and me standing in the foyer with Nathan and his parents. Well, Susan Chin said finally. That was a lot. I laughed, a wet, shaky sound. I'm so sorry. I knew they could be difficult, but I never thought they'd actually try to cancel the venue. Don't apologize for them, Michael said firmly. You're not responsible for their behavior. He's right. Nathan pulled me closer. You're not your family, Liv. You've never been your family. Speaking of which, Ethan straightened his shirt, his composure returning. The rehearsal dinner is in 4 hours. I've got the chef making Nathan's mom's fried rice recipe. I hope that's okay, Susan. I found it online and thought it would be a nice touch. Susan's eyes widened. You're serving my recipe at the rehearsal dinner? Family recipes from both sides. That's what this wedding is about, right? Bringing two families together. Ethan smiled. The fact that it might annoy my mother is just a bonus. Susan laughed, a genuine, delighted sound. I think I'm going to like having you as family, Ethan. Likewise. He turned to me.
Now.
You have a wedding to prepare for. Helena will show you to the bridal suite. I had it redone last month, and I think you're going to love it. Nathan, the groom's quarters are in the east wing. I suggest you both get some rest. What about you? I asked. I have some phone calls to make. He pulled his phone from his pocket, starting with the family lawyer, just in case Dad decides to make any more trouble between now and tomorrow. You think he will?
No.
Ethan shook his head. I think I scared him enough to behave. But preparation beats hope every time. He headed for the stairs, pausing halfway up to look back at me. Hey, Liv. Yeah, I meant what I said. You're the reason I stayed sane all those years. The reason I didn't just cut the whole family off and disappear. His expression softened. You saw me when no one else did. I just wanted to return the favor. Before I could respond, he was gone, disappearing up the stairs to whatever corner of this enormous house he called his own. Nathan squeezed my hand. Your brother is something else. He really is. I wiped my eyes with my free hand. I still can't believe he bought this place. He never even told me until the renovation was finished. Just called one day and said, Hey, want to come see my new house? That sounds like something he'd do. Nathan kissed my forehead. Come on. Let's go see this bridal suite. I have a feeling tomorrow is going to be a very long day. The wedding was everything I had dreamed it would be, and nothing like my family had expected. The ceremony took place on the bluff, with the Pacific Ocean crashing against the rocks below and the setting sun turning the sky into a canvas of orange and gold. Ethan walked me down the aisle, his arms steady under mine, and when he handed me off to Nathan, I saw tears in both their eyes. My parents sat in the front row, their expressions complicated, but their behavior impeccable. Whatever Ethan had said to them during the hours between our confrontation and the ceremony, it had worked. My mother even managed to smile when Nathan stepped on the glass at the end of the ceremony, a nod to his Jewish heritage that we had incorporated into the otherwise secular service. The reception was held in the restored ballroom, with its soaring ceilings and crystal chandeliers. Susan Chen's fried rice was served alongside my grandmother's pot roast recipe and Nathan's aunt's famous spring rolls. The toasts were heartfelt, the dancing was joyous, and for one perfect evening, both families came together as something approaching a single unit. Around midnight, when the party was winding down and Nathan and I were preparing to leave for our honeymoon, my father found me alone in the garden. "Olivia." I turned. He looked older than he had that morning, as if the day's events had stripped away some of the armor he usually wore. "Dad." He came to stand beside me, looking out at the moonlit ocean. "I owe you an apology. You apologized at the rehearsal dinner. That was a public apology. This is a private one." He was quiet for a moment. "I spent so many years trying to make you into something I understood that I never bothered to understand what you already were. That was wrong. And I'm sorry." "Thank you. I'm also sorry about what I said about Nathan's family. They seem like good people." "They are good people." "Yes." Another pause. "Better than us, probably." I didn't argue with him. "Ethan said something today that I can't stop thinking about." My father turned to face me. "He said you were the only one who ever loved him, without conditions. Is that really how both of you see it? That our love came with conditions?" I considered the question carefully. "I think your love is real, Dad. I've never doubted that you love us.